A serial killer with an extremely perverted method of killing. The system allowed me to turn back time, change the trajectory to turn him into a good young man, and save the lives of those he was supposed to kill. After a long silence, I asked, why? The system honestly replied, because you are unlucky. Chapter 1. Wearing a backpack, dragging my feet step by step, I sighed continuously. The system coldly said, you have already traveled across half the world, what else do you want to hide from? You're not even as good as the other masters. I replied, at least I've managed to escape until now. Sigh. The system sighed again. On this 20-year-old face, sighing was not appropriate at all, but it was uncontrollable. It was too much of a headache. Ever since coming to this world, I had only wanted to live peacefully, eating a plate of stinky tofu. Who would have thought that I would be drawn into this mission for no reason, both absurd and frustrating? The system appeared at that moment. It said, I can help you return, but you have to complete this mission first. After the system finished speaking, I hesitated for a moment. Doing the mission was fine. But thinking about my parents, if I didn't return, they would be very sad. Suddenly, the sound of arguing from the living room interrupted my train of thought. My mother's voice, you brought this child back, then left her there to play, when will you care about your daughter? The room immediately fell silent. My father forced himself, then you are right to suspect, okay, now I'll admit it myself. Mom laughed coldly, then why don't you admit it, why bring someone else's child home? It sounded like a mess, I hadn't even left the room yet. Who did my father bring home? I quickly opened the door, and as soon as I stepped out, a handsome boy was standing in the living room opposite me. What's going on? I didn't know what was going on either. I had now returned to being a 9-year-old kid. The system sarcastically said, see, it's really fate. It turned out that the person my father brought home was the one who would later become a perverted murderer, Kaidu. My father looked at my mother in confusion, this child looks so much like our daughter. The face, the eyes, what's the point of looking like that? I gritted my teeth and whispered, system, I only agreed to do the mission out of necessity. This morning, my father had promised loudly, Mom is busy today, let me pick you up, don't worry, it definitely won't be wrong. The result was not wrong, but it was the wrong pickup. My mother was still wearing an apron, probably just finished cooking, turned to glare at my father, hurry up and give this child back. They must be worried crazy. My father quickly squatted down and asked Ji-Rui, son, where do you live? Or give me your parents' phone number, so I can call and let you know in advance. The handsome boy showed no expression, his bright eyes looked straight at me, coldly uttering a sentence that made everyone feel sorry, I don't have parents. Being stared at by his eyes, my hair stood on end. The system reassured me, don't worry, if he wants to kill someone, we'll have to wait a few more years. He's still young now, there's no need to be afraid. It's better to be quiet than to be reassured like that. Hearing the boy speak, my father was speechless, my mother wiped away her tears, poor child, how could he not have parents? A bad feeling came over, and sure enough, less than a second later, my mother went over and patted the boy's head, son, I cook very well, do you want to stay for a meal? Ji-Rui nodded. My mother smiled happily, turned to me and instructed, Xiao Qiao, take her to wash her hands first, we'll eat later. Looking at my parents, then at Ji-Rui's cold eyes, I took a deep breath, and forced a smile, okay, let's go, wash your hands. I didn't say anything, and led the boy into the bathroom. After washing my hands, I quickly handed him a towel. While wiping his hands, he suddenly asked, what's your name? I was startled, and raised my head in panic. Ji-Rui looked at me attentively, word by word, what's your name? I swallowed hard, call me Ding Qiao Qiao. Just because of that sentence, throughout the meal, my soul was flying away. The system interrupted again, if you want to complete the mission, you must first overcome your fear. How do you overcome it? He is a murderous pervert after all, isn't it normal to be afraid now? If I offend him, what will happen if I get revenge later? The system disdained, think about it, he's just a kid now, what's there to be afraid of a kid? That's right, just a kid. Experience, intelligence, I can overwhelm him in everything, what's there to be afraid of? Thinking that, I immediately picked up a piece of meat for Ji-Rui. Ji-Rui looked at me in surprise. I smiled and explained, we are classmates, so we should help each other. My mother happily praised, that's right, so you two are in the same class? Deskmates? I nodded, his name is Ji-Rui, sitting at the last desk. Hearing the way you talk, I thought you two knew each other before. My mother poured water, and instructed, classmates must care for each other, don't let your friend get bullied, understand? Actually, what my mother said was not wrong, Ji-Rui had indeed been bullied a lot. But what does the phrase, must be strong mean? System, am I really strong? System, of course, your belly is even bigger than the main character's belly. Me, 3 dots. There really is no reason to argue. I ate 2 bowls of rice, while Ji-Rui only ate 1 bowl. He ate very cleanly, not touching anything other than the piece of meat I picked out. He must have a cleanliness problem. After dinner, my mother saw that Ji-Rui had nowhere to go, so she suggested that he stay the night. Ji-Rui didn't refuse. There was no spare room in the house, so my mother decided to let him sleep with me. At first I objected, but thinking that he was just a child, and being near him would help complete the mission, so in the end I reluctantly agreed. Ji-Rui seemed very curious about my room. After I finished bathing, I saw him staring at the wish bottle on the table as soon as I entered the room. I took out a set of clean clothes from the closet and gave them to him. Go take a bath. He nodded, obediently going into the bathroom. I muttered, actually, he's quite good. If he stays like this forever, it would be great. The system was busy playing a game, and replied perfunctorily, don't forget your mission. Ji-Rui came out after taking a shower, his loose clothes making him look even smaller. He stood in front of my bed, and said softly, where do I sleep? I was startled, and quickly lifted the blanket, come here. Ji-Rui hesitated a bit. I sat up, patted the bed, and asked, is there a problem? He raised his head to look at me, his eyes serious as he asked, why aren't you like the others, and don't bully me? The question stunned me. Ji-Rui was always bullied by his classmates. Although I didn't participate, I had kept my distance from him before. I thought for a moment and asked again, why did they bully you? He remained silent and didn't answer. I said again, it's okay, we're friends. Friends should help each other. He looked at me and asked, what are friends? I patiently explained, they are people who share joys and sorrows, and overcome difficulties together. He didn't seem to understand much, and just nodded. The bed wasn't big, but it wasn't too cramped either. Ji-Rui had just finished bathing, and he had a light fragrance on him. I pulled the blanket up, trying not to think too much, and then fell asleep. The next morning, my mother called us both to get up for breakfast. I still tried to lie in bed, this bad habit could not be fixed. Ji-Rui had finished washing his face, and I was still sleepy. He poked me with his finger, we're going to be late for school. I opened my eyes to look at the clock and mumbled, there are still 3 minutes left. As soon as I finished speaking, my mother shouted from outside, still not getting up, Ding Chow Chow, do you want to be beaten? Her voice was like thunder, and every time I was startled awake. I quickly hid behind Ji-Rui and stammered, I'm awake. The system sneered, the mission has changed, you have to overcome your fear of your mother. On the way to school, Ji-Rui followed behind me, looking rather unmotivated. I turned around and asked, didn't you sleep well? He shook his head, not answering. Before I could say anything more, a loud voice called out from behind, Chow Chow. Turning around, I saw a skinny classmate running past like the wind, shouting, hurry up, we're almost late for class. Damn it. The mission changed to another item, fear of the teacher. I hurriedly ran like the wind, forgetting to pull Ji-Rui along. As soon as I stepped into the classroom, the bell rang. I proudly turned back to show off to Ji-Rui, see? Still on time. The system mocked, you're lazy but still not late, what a miracle. I was embarrassed, and snapped, shut up. Ji-Rui didn't say anything, and went straight to the back of the class. He always sat alone, no one wanted to be his deskmate. Normally, he didn't talk to anyone, but his academic performance was excellent, always at the top of the class. 2 classes passed, I put my head down on the table and slept soundly. When I looked up, I saw a group of students bullying Ji Rue. The leader was a fat guy, accompanied by a few others who acted as accomplices. He threw Ji Rue's pencil case hard on the ground, his voice mocking, "You bastard without a father or mother." The system said, "The kids nowadays are really scary. Go and deal with them." I gritted my teeth and agreed, this time the system and I finally had the same opinion. I stepped forward and kicked the fat guy in the leg. He staggered and fell to the ground. The system was surprised, "Are you that good?" I shrugged. In my previous life, I learned Taekwondo. My father forced me to learn martial arts from a young age for self-defense, especially after hearing many stories about children being bullied. At first I didn't like it, but over time I found it interesting. The kick not only made the fat guy fall flat on his face, but also made the whole class dumbfounded. The fat guy hugged his leg and shouted loudly, "You dare to hit me?" I sneered, "So what? Is it okay to hit someone else? If you bully Ji Rue again, you'll know what I can do." After saying that, I turned back to look at Ji Rue. His eyes were full of confusion. It only took 2 minutes for the bullying group to be completely taken care of by me. I puffed out my chest and proudly declared, "Understood? From now on, whoever dares to touch Ji Rue, I will deal with them the same way." All the children were stunned, probably from now on they wouldn't dare to bully anymore. I asked the system, "Hey, if Ji Rue doesn't suffer any injuries or get bullied, but instead is treated kindly by his friends, then the possibility of him becoming a pervert in the future will decrease, right?" The system replied, "That's right." I nodded. Actually, except for those who are naturally antisocial, most cases of perversion can be prevented. If we change their childhood environment, let them grow up in love and safety, then they will definitely become normal people. The system paused for a moment, then said, But you should take care of the immediate matter now?" I was puzzled. "What's wrong?" "Your homeroom teacher is here." Why did that troublemaker appear at this time? The whole class silently watched as the homeroom teacher led the group of gangsters out, heading straight to the office. After hearing the whole story from the group, the teacher decided to call my parents. When I answered the phone, I hurriedly instructed, "Dad, if anything happens, don't tell Mom." My dad was on guard. "If Mom finds out, you'll have to take responsibility for it yourself." I used my best trick. "What else do you want to hide from Mom and Dad? Is it private again?" My dad quickly got down to it. "Come on, daughter. We can talk about anything, why do we have to be so tense?" My dad came to pick me up from school. The sun was already setting. After completing the procedures, there were only a few people left in the schoolyard. While Mom called countless times, Dad made up an excuse that he was taking me out, then hurriedly drove me home. I looked at Dad doubtfully. "Do you believe it, Mom?" Dad sighed, "Probably not." But then, as if remembering something, his eyes suddenly lit up. "How is it, daughter? Did you really beat a fat guy?" I nodded, "That's right." Dad smiled proudly. "Although Dad doesn't encourage fighting, I think this is right. My daughter is not only kind but also talented, the best in the world." The atmosphere was quite cheerful, and I blurted out, "Dad is also the best. Dad is not afraid of anyone, not even Mom." Dad hesitated a bit, but then firmly said, "Yes. As a man, how can you be afraid of your wife?" "I was just saying it for fun." The system commented, "The distance between words and the truth is sometimes very far. Good luck." Me, 3 dots. While chatting happily, I suddenly discovered someone following me. Turning around, it turned out to be Ji Rue. I was surprised. "You've been following us all this time?" Ji Rue nodded. I almost cried, and said emotionally, "System, it's true that hard work pays off. He must be worried about me, so he's standing here waiting." The system said coldly, "No. Maybe he's just waiting for everyone to eat." Me, 3 dots. Looking at the boy standing quietly with his bag on his back, my father was also moved. He patted Ji Rui's head and said gently, "Let's go inside. Mom has finished cooking." When they got home, Mom started questioning them continuously. "Where did you two go? Why didn't you tell me in advance? And there was a fight. What did the teacher call for?" Although my father was afraid of my mother, he couldn't lose face in front of his children, so he tried to act tough. "What else do you want to ask? Get the rice out." My mother glared at him and said nothing more. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. Based on experience, I knew that my father had just caused a big problem. Sure enough, right after that, my mother grabbed my father's ear and dragged him into the bedroom to settle things. I quickly pulled Ji Rui into my room and locked the door. Ji Rui looked at me in confusion. I explained, "Let Dad deal with Mom himself. If you don't dodge, Mom will get angry and beat you." Ji Rui looked at me, his expression still calm. After a long time, he asked, "Why did you do that?" I was confused. "Huh? What did you do? You're willing to be beaten by Mom, why are you helping me?" "So that's what happened. Being beaten by your mother is nothing, it's a small matter," I replied, "but being bullied by your friends is different. You will easily be negatively influenced and become an abnormal person." "I'm just helping you, my friend." Ji Rui continued to ask, "But why do you have to help me?" I turned to the system in frustration. "System, only murderous perverts ask why this much, right?" The system coldly replied, "Don't bother me, I'm playing a ranking game." I turned back and explained, "I told you, we are friends. As friends, we should share joys and sorrows, and help each other. Seeing you in pain makes me even sadder than if I were in pain myself." Ji Rui seemed to vaguely understand, but didn't say anything. I quickly recognized my mother's footsteps approaching, and immediately pulled Ji Rui aside. "We are friends, right? If there's a next time, it'll be your turn to protect me." Ji Rui looked at me in confusion. I explained further, "My mother is about to enter the room. I will be beaten later, but you have to stand in the way and help me take a few hits." As soon as I finished speaking, my mother walked in, smiling. "So, do you really want to be beaten this time?" I knew that my mother was using the scare tactic, but I still asked cautiously, "Are you really going to beat me?" My mother laughed, her voice gentle. "What do you mean beat me? My daughter is so good, I haven't praised her enough. Come on, I've cooked sweet and sour pork ribs." "Oh, and Ji Rui, what else do you like to eat?" I was stunned. This development was completely beyond my expectations. The meal was warm and quick. It was just a pity that my father seemed to have endured a psychological torture in the room. When eating, he was so careful that he had to look at my mother's reaction before picking up a piece of rib. The system said, "Congratulations, the milestone of only dad is injured has been completed." I chuckled, but I was afraid that my dad would take it to heart, so I held back. As for Ji Rui, because of his cleanliness, he didn't pick up any dishes on the table. Even when my mother picked up food for him, he just looked, without touching his chopsticks. Perhaps my mother also realized, so she gently said, "Why don't you get your own food?" Ji Rui nodded obediently. I secretly observed Ji Rui. He was really quiet, always obedient, gently nodding or shaking his head instead of answering. It was hard for me to imagine that a child like this would later become a serial killer. But, thinking back, everything had signs from before. Actually, in the previous world, he and I had never had the opportunity to interact or talk as much as now. At that time, we were both in 3rd grade, around 9 years old. Because of my happy family and optimistic personality, I always made friends easily. But the first time I met Ji Rui, a boy who always sat alone, silent and isolated, I couldn't help but be curious and wanted to get to know him. During a gym class, I saw Ji Rui standing alone by the wall, so I decided to approach him and say hello. "What are you doing here?" Ji Rui looked up, and I still remember his eyes that day. Cold, quiet, mixed with a bit of darkness, as if carrying endless loneliness. He spoke in a very calm tone, as if he was asking about a very normal thing. "How do I kill my mother?" A 9-year-old child said such words. At that time, my whole body was cold, my hair stood on end, my legs were weak and I couldn't stand. I staggered and ran away. From that day on, I never dared to talk to Ji-Rue again. As soon as I saw him from afar, I immediately found a way to avoid him. There was no further contact. But now, thinking back to that year, I realized that it wasn't as scary as I thought. I just don't know if Ji-Rue still remembers that incident. Recently, Ji-Rue has been following me around. If I were a normal child, I would have definitely cried out to heaven and earth, trying to find ways to refuse. But in my heart, I'm an adult, and being with him isn't uncomfortable at all, and I even find it interesting. However, Ji-Rue is really quiet. He's always quiet like a shadow, to the point that sometimes I forget that he's around. Of course, this damn system can never be forgotten. Hey, can you lower the volume while playing a game? I reminded. The system glared at me, then quietly put on the headphones. The next day, I was woken up early by Ji-Rue. I glanced at the alarm clock with half-closed eyes, and grumbled, "It's still early, sleep a little more." Ji-Rue coldly replied, "No." The system was still playing the game, and when it heard that, it laughed gleefully, "Haha, our male lead has already spoken. Be careful, if you make him angry, you'll hold a grudge for a long time." I didn't bother arguing, jumped up, and started getting ready. When my mother saw Ji-Rue, she was surprised. "Oh my God, is the sun rising from the west? Waking up so early today?" She smiled and patted Ji-Rue's head, joking, "Ji-Rue is really good. From now on, I'll give you the task of waking up Chow Chow." Ji-Rue just nodded silently, as if accepting a very important task. Thanks to Ji-Rue, I arrived at school on time today, and had plenty of time to move my seat to the back of the class. The skinny monkey, sitting at the same table, curiously asked, "Chow Chow, what are you doing?" "I'll move my seat down here," I replied. "Is there anything wrong with studying next to him? It's easy to exchange homework." Skinny monkey pouted, mumbling, "I don't think he's as trustworthy as me." I ignored him, pulled up a chair, and sat down next to Ji-Rue. "Hey, from now on I'll protect you." Ji-Rue just looked up at me once, calmly replied, "Yeah." From then on, the fatty short gang didn't dare to bother Ji-Rue anymore. I thought everything would be peaceful, until after school, when the fatty short gang blocked me at the door again. But this time, with fatty short, was a strange young man, big and muscular, looking like a senior in the underworld. The stranger looked at me, curled his lips, and asked, "I heard you're Chow Chow, the one who beat my brother?" I felt my throat dry, swallowing my saliva with difficulty. The system laughed gleefully. "Be more aggressive, keep beating me up." I snapped, "Shut up." To be honest, this fatty short guy was quite resilient. But anyway, I've only just started my first grade today, how can I deal with this kind of group? Oh my God, system, why do I have to get involved in these childish troubles? The system calmly whistled, "Maybe it's your fate." Me. Okay, I'll have to think of a plan. After thinking, I pulled Ji-Rue along, and at the same time exchanged glances with Sick Monkey, ordering, "Run." This alley was not very long, but there was no place to hide. We could only try to run forward as fast as possible. I grabbed Ji-Rue's hand, ran at full speed, and quickly increased the distance with the people behind. Sick Monkey was not so lucky. He was caught, looking like a chick being picked up. From afar, Sick Monkey turned back and shouted, "Run. Don't worry about me." I felt my eyes sting. System, I didn't expect him to have such a chivalrous spirit. Even children still know how to think about their friends, right? The system seemed surprised. "You're really moved by such a small thing?" I didn't bother to reply, just said briefly, "Now I have to think of a way to save him." After running for a while, I immediately found an adult nearby to ask for help. After explaining the situation, we called the police and went back to save Sick Monkey. When we returned, the thugs had left, leaving only Sick Monkey sitting there sobbing. I quickly checked, "Did they beat you? Did something happen?" Sick Monkey shook his head, crying and unable to speak. Suddenly, he rushed over and hugged me tightly. "Chow Chow." I almost lost face. The system snorted softly, Do you have any feelings of guilt in your heart? I patted Sick Monkey on the back and reassured him, it's okay, go home and tell Mom. If Mom doesn't let you go out to play anymore, I'll come pick you up. Ji-Rui, who had been standing silently all this time, suddenly stepped forward, grabbed Sick Monkey's arm, and pulled him up. Stand up. Sick Monkey, who was crying, suddenly stopped, and then obediently stood beside Ji-Rui. Ji-Rui looked a little impatient, but he still tried to hold back and didn't say anything more. Skinny Monkey's mother and I had already investigated the matter clearly. Both of us were very serious and determined to pursue it to the end. Actually, Shorty Fatty was also too much, but the children in that neighborhood were even worse. They dared to bully a seedling of the motherland like that. System, Shorty Fatty? Me, please shut up, thank you. As for the outcome of the matter, my mother didn't tell me clearly, only that from that day on, Shorty Fatty never appeared again. My parents also started to pick us up and drop us off regularly. No matter how busy they were there on time every day. This had its advantages, but also its disadvantages. My parents had always been very strict about giving us pocket money. Before, after school, we always stopped by the snack stalls on the side of the road to buy something. But now, every day, someone picks me up and drops me off. There's no chance anymore. I can only stand there and look at the delicious food in front of me, unable to touch it, feeling extremely miserable. Oh system, I'm craving it so much. It's like having a locked game account, and I can only watch others play. The system sighed. Your mother is still there? Me, hee, just kidding, don't be so serious. Actually, this incident was quite strange. Another time, I asked the system to play a game for me. Because it was in the middle of a ranked match, and I had something to do, I let it play instead. Remember to play carefully, I'll be right back. The system agreed confidently, and promised to help me play well. But when I came back, my account was reported and locked immediately. I shouted, what's going on? The system sat still, not daring to say anything, only groaning as if about to cry. That's great. This world is full of stupid people. I just wanted to help you, but now my account is locked, what a shame. I coaxed, it's okay, it's only been locked for a day. You'll be able to play again tomorrow. The system sarcastically said, thanks for the comfort. It's okay, since your parents will pick you up from now on, my life will be happy forever, right? Me, 3 dots. Finally, one weekend, we decided to go out for a delicious meal. I asked my parents, Ji-Rui, and Sick Monkey, to go with me. Because Ji-Rui was with me, my parents no longer objected to us having snacks, and even happily agreed. We went straight to a milk tea shop. I especially liked the peach cheese of this shop. I had been looking at it for a long time. Today I must try it. After ordering, I let Ji-Rui choose his own dish. I turned to ask the system, do you find it strange? I have never seen a child as stubborn as Ji-Rui. But the system was busy playing a game, not paying attention to what I said. Very quickly, my drink was brought out. I had asked for some ice, and as soon as I picked up the milk tea, I took a deep breath. The sweet, rich taste of the cheese milk tea immediately made me so happy that I almost forgot about the world. I excitedly brought the cup of tea in front of Ji-Rui, saying, try it. It's really delicious. After saying that, I realized something was unusual. Ji-Rui had a cleanliness disorder. Regretting that the milk tea was too delicious, I was about to pull my hand back, but unexpectedly, Ji-Rui held the cup and took a sip. Even though I had already finished the milk tea, Ji-Rui still picked it up and continued to drink through the straw I had just used. I was a little stunned, but quickly regained my composure and hurriedly asked, how is it? Is it delicious? Ji-Rui nodded slightly, yeah. I suggested, how about I buy you another cup? Ji-Rui shook his head, no need, that's fine. He seemed very comfortable. I was happy, but also worried. How could I treat Ji-Rui well without making him remember my grudge, and then later use it as an excuse to destroy me? Imagine Ji-Rui saying, ding chow chow, you even dare to share your milk tea, if I don't kill you, who will I kill? Thinking of this, I shivered. After enjoying all the delicious food, we decided to take Kaidu to the park. I asked, have you ever been to an amusement park? Jirue shook his head. I exclaimed, system, how pitiful. But the system didn't bother to reply, still focused on the game. Because the thrill rides were too dangerous, I only dared to take Jirue to play the carousel. Jirue didn't seem as excited as the other kids, just sat quietly looking around. I asked, do you like it? He thought for a moment, then nodded, even emphasizing, I like it very much. His serious attitude made me a little confused, but oh well, let's just say he was really happy. While Jirue went to wash his hands, I whispered to the system, he's so pitiful. Should I treat him better in the future? The system replied in a lazy voice, yeah, but how better? I thought seriously, and said, buy toys, buy nice things, give him a makeup set, buy him a villa, and a Maserati. After listening for a while, the system said, that's really unrealistic. I immediately corrected, okay, as long as you don't yell at him, even if he makes you angry, don't hold a grudge, listen to whatever he says, do whatever he wants. Okay? We went out for a while. By the time we got back I was exhausted, sat down on the chair and drank a glass of water in one gulp. My mother was cleaning a corner of the house. Seeing me like that, she reminded me, you guys have fun going out, but next time remember not to drink anything too cold, be careful not to get a stomachache. Mom, what are you cleaning? Oh, I'm cleaning to free up a room. This bed is too small, the two of us have to squeeze together, it's inconvenient. I don't see any problem, I even feel that this is more convenient to monitor Kaidu, ensuring the mission is completed. Jirue didn't have any obvious reaction. He didn't say much, just stood by the side. I waited for my mother to finish cleaning up and then took my backpack, leaving a sentence, remember to wake me up tomorrow. Having an alarm clock like Jirue was really perfect. He woke me up on time every day, without missing a minute. I was both miserable and comforted myself, it's okay system, punctuality is a good trait. He's gradually getting better. The system immediately poured cold water on me, if it's too extreme, it will turn into an obsessive-compulsive disorder. You know, most murderous perverts have this trait. Do you need to say that? Even though the system was always causing trouble, I still couldn't help but notice that Jirue was changing day by day, getting better and better. He greeted my mother seriously, even more politely than his own son like me. Although he still didn't like Shoho, the name of my chubby friend, Jirue was willing to talk to me and help me with my homework. He no longer had a cold expression, and occasionally he even smiled a rare smile. He started helping me pick up food, put away my wrinkled books, and always remembered to hold my hand during gym class. Those small but precious changes touched me. System, at this rate, my mission is almost complete, right? The system rarely praised, but this time he agreed, this is probably the smoothest mission I've ever seen. One day, I suddenly exclaimed, Jirue, you're getting better. You'll definitely become a kind and wonderful person in the future. He nodded seriously. After a while, he said, let's work hard together. Summer came and I excitedly planned my vacation. Though Hal also could not sit still, he wanted to go out with us but was flatly refused by Kaidu. Shoho was upset, alright, if I can't go, at least you guys have to call me when you're having fun. If my mother beats me, I'll take it all. Jirue snorted coldly, waving his hand threateningly, when the time comes, try hiding. Shoho smiled awkwardly, not daring to say anything more. After the holiday started, my parents decided to take Jirue and me on a trip. I said excitedly, this time we'll explore some really beautiful places. Jirue smiled lightly, his eyes curved, yeah. His smile really made me feel like I had just won a prize. I couldn't help but kiss him on the cheek. Suddenly, Jirue stopped. I thought he was upset, and quickly tried to wipe it away, but before I could touch him, he turned around, his face as red as a boiled shrimp. Oh my, you're still embarrassed. Preparing to go on a trip, my mother told me to go out and buy spices to stew ribs. While I was busy choosing, I lightly kicked Ji Rui standing next to me, intending to ask him to help. He understood, didn't say much, picked up the things, and left. But until now, he still hasn't come back. It was almost 9 p.m., and Ji Rui still hadn't returned. I was so panicked that I almost cried. My mother was in tears, and my father quickly called the police. But the local police force was limited, they only sent one person to help. We checked almost all the surveillance cameras in the area, but still couldn't find any clues. My mother collapsed, unable to stand. My father went to find the neighborhood management board, asking for their help in the search. I was the only one standing in the house, speechless. Could it be that he was kidnapped by human traffickers? I just told him to go out, and now he's missing like this. The system, although not very trustworthy normally, now seemed serious. It was trying to find traces and comforted me. Don't panic, wait a minute, we will. Before I finished speaking, it suddenly stopped. What's wrong? What did you find? The system hesitated for a moment, then said, I just discovered someone. Who? It's the male lead's biological mother. I was stunned, huh? Didn't the male lead not have parents at first? Didn't his mother die because of a space error? Why did she appear now? The system's tone became more serious. It seems that the space has repaired itself. His mother didn't die and even appeared, but there's a problem. What problem? If I remember correctly, his mother is mentally ill and often abuses him. If Ji Rui is taken back by her now, the consequences will be very serious. I felt like I was falling into an abyss. Address. Quick, give me the address. The system quickly gave directions. According to the calculation, it would only take about 2 minutes to get there, but because it was dark and the area was unsafe, it took me twice as long. Without much time to think, I just left a note for my parents and immediately ran away. The wind was howling, thunder and lightning echoed in the sky like a warning. The sound of rain pattering on the ground made people both tremble and respect the power of nature. Even though it was pitch black, I still ran in the pouring rain. My clothes were soaked, my body was cold, and each step was heavy. But I couldn't stop. Ji Rui was definitely in a lot of pain, very miserable. I couldn't slow down, and even more so, I couldn't turn back. It was really terrible. He didn't deserve to suffer like this. As I ran, tears flowed down. I sobbed, even the system had to coax me, don't cry anymore, if this continues, the mission will fail. I thought it was talking about the mission. In my anger, I shouted, idiot. Who cares about that damn mission? I have to save Ji Rui. The system fell silent. I cried and ran, every second and minute passed, and finally I reached the foot of a small mountain. The system instructed, you have to climb up, the house is halfway up the mountain. The rain was getting heavier and heavier. I held onto the tree trunk tightly, took a deep breath, and then started climbing. The road was very slippery, I fell countless times, and my feet were already bleeding profusely. The system was afraid that I would be discouraged, so it kept talking to distract me. Hey, do you remember the last time we argued about strawberry ice cream? I think you're really a weird person, liking that kind of sour taste. I was both crying and laughing, looking like a madman. Finally, after much effort, I reached the small house on the mountain. An ancient house covered with bright red vines, surrounded on all 4 sides by large chains. The house seemed to have been abandoned for a long time, standing alone in the middle of the night and the rain. The atmosphere was gloomy, like in a fairy tale, where the witch imprisoned the princess. The gate was locked. I had no choice but to climb over the wall. The system reminded me anxiously, if you are discovered, the mission will completely fail. The reward achievement will also be gone, not to mention I will lose the chance to become the perfect love system. I didn't bother to listen, just shouted, shut up. The system obediently kept quiet. After a while of struggling, I finally entered the house. The main door was ajar, the dim light of the candle shining through the crack of the door. There was no electricity inside the house, only flickering candlelight. Candles were all over the walls, stairs, and corners of the room. In the center of the house, the wooden floor was arranged in a star shape with candles, and Ji Rui was lying in the middle of it. His entire body was covered in blood, his face pale, weak like a candle about to burn out. The scene before my eyes made me tremble and take a step back. "Oh, who is it?" A soft, sinuous voice like a snake rang out. I turned my head and saw a woman standing on the stairs. Her long hair was loose, her skin was strangely pale, her lips were red as blood. She held a candle, barefoot, and walked step by step towards me. "Xiao Rui, do you remember the fairy tale your mother told you?" Her eyes were cold and distant, her voice soft but made people shiver. The beautiful princess was cursed by the witch, falling into an eternal sleep. Only when the brave prince appeared, the curse could be broken. "Xiao Rui, you are my princess." Ji Rui suddenly struggled, trying to sit up. But his body was too weak, no matter how hard he tried, he could only mumble two words, "Save me." My tears flowed. "System, tell me. It's like this, how can we save him?" The system was silent for a long time and then said, "Yes, we must save him. But remember, we must take the princess out of here." I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and shouted, "Okay, but I must take the princess out safely." I took off the things that were bothering me, then faced that crazy woman. She looked at me, sighed softly, seemingly full of regret. What a pity. The pure and kind princess is the child of the devil. Returning to Satan's side is where she belongs. Her eyes turned cold, and today, I will sacrifice this princess to Satan. I tried to stay calm. If I wanted to save Ji Rui, I had to defeat this woman first. Although I was still just a child, I had learned some basic martial arts moves. For a skinny woman like her, I still had some confidence. The important thing was to deal with her quickly, and strike a decisive blow to control her. I looked around, recalled the moves I had learned, and took a deep breath to calm myself. While she was still talking non-stop, I seized the opportunity, kicked the handrail of the stairs to gain momentum, and then threw my strongest kick at her. The candle in her hand fell to the ground, and the woman was also knocked to the floor. She passed out. The system breathed a sigh of relief, and I quickly ran to Ji Rui. I found his wrists and ankles injured, bleeding so much that she was almost intentionally letting him bleed to death. That scene sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't imagine how a mother could be so cruel. I hurriedly stopped Ji Rui's bleeding, tears falling non-stop, drop by drop soaking the floor. "It's my fault. It's my fault. I shouldn't have left you alone." Ji Rui moved slightly, his hazy eyes trying to open. He weakly raised his hand, trying to wipe my tears, but he had no strength left. Even so, he still tried to smile. It was a real smile, weak but strangely warm. Then, Ji Rui's eyes slowly closed. "No. System. What's wrong with him? Is there a way? Think of a way," I shouted, my voice hoarse and choked, but the system just shook its head helplessly. Suddenly, I heard a loud noise coming from afar. I turned my head and looked outside, and saw my parents and a group of policemen running towards me. "They're here." I pointed at the note. "A message has been left. Ji Rui was saved." Feeling relieved, I said a few words to my parents, but my body started to feel dizzy again, and my eyes couldn't open anymore. I vaguely heard my mother crying and calling my name, but I didn't have the strength to answer. Well, let me rest a bit. Chapter 2. On the last day of summer vacation, I received a call from Shou Ho. He was like an ant running around a hot pot, constantly asking to borrow homework to copy. I smiled faintly, said one sentence, "Do your own things," and then hung up. Everything in life seemed to have returned to its original orbit. My father was still the same as usual, always making silly jokes. My mother was still cooking delicious meals, Shou Ho was still struggling with homework. Even the system was no different from before, only knowing how to play games every day. But there was one difference. Ji Rui. After that incident, I never saw him again. Mom said, when I was in a coma from a fever, the police took Ji Rui away. They immediately sent him to the best hospital abroad for treatment. At the same time, his mentally ill mother was also sent to a mental hospital, no longer having the chance to harm anyone. Ji Rui's father appeared. I asked the system why the mother appeared after all these years. The system explained, that year, because Ji Rui was constantly abused by his mother, he reported it to the police. The mother was sent to a mental hospital, but because the hospital did not manage it properly, she escaped, leading to this tragedy. I asked again, what about his father? The system sighed, actually, the father is the source of all the disasters. Ji Rui's father was a womanizer, forcing his wife to go crazy, leaving his son to suffer the consequences. At first, he was reluctant to maintain this marriage because of his wife's fortune. But when his wife went crazy, he was afraid of affecting his reputation, so he secretly locked her in that castle. As for Ji Rui, because he was her son, he always hated him, even kicked him out of the house. Why did he only acknowledge his son now? The system shrugged, because he just discovered that he can't have children anymore. The other 2 children are not his biological children, so he was forced to take Ji Rui back. That's too much. I muttered, but there was another problem that worried me even more. Ji Rui has been sent abroad now, and he can't see him again. How can I continue to guide him to become a good person? If he continues to live with such a father, even if he changes now, he will easily degenerate in the future. The system frowned and said thoughtfully, that's right. But I've asked the headquarters, and they said everything is fine. We can only follow nature. Oh well. It took me a long time to adapt. But my parents were still the greatest source of comfort. Occasionally, my mother would cook braised ribs, sighing as she cooked, tears welling up in her eyes, poor child. As for my father, although he pretended to be a strong man, he often mentioned Ji Rui. While speaking, he hugged my mother and cried, and the 2 of them hugged each other and cried. At school, Shouho sat absent-mindedly, staring at Ji Rui's seat. Even though he's fierce, he's actually very good to me. He even helps me with my lessons, and he explains them more clearly than the teachers. At this point, Shouho also started to cry. I shook my head, holding my forehead and looking out the window. Unexpectedly, the system started to sob, hoo-hoo. Ji Rui used to help me play games. Now without him, I keep losing. Ding chow chow. Okay, I also feel a little guilty. But all of this is the system's fault. It's only because the system was too busy playing games and didn't investigate Ji Rui's background that this big problem happened. From now on, I've grasped the system's weakness. It seems that I can control it for the rest of my life. One sleepless night, after finishing a game, the system suddenly asked me, do you miss Ji Rui? Miss you? I looked up. The moonlight shone through the curtains, creating swaying shadows. The Hello Kitty painting on the wall was still the same as before. However, everything seemed to have changed. The most useless person, but the one that makes others most attached. I laughed. Just look once, everything will pass, but the things that have been experienced are not regrettable. For example, going back to the past, meeting my parents again. This time, I could pay more attention to the smallest details, how my parents took care of me, how they aged, every wrinkle carved on their faces, and even the silver hair gradually dotting their black hair. Or when mentioning Ji Rui, he was no longer a vague name in my memory. Instead, he became a special character, carrying a fairy tale aura, like a princess who had been rescued from an ancient castle. Chapter 3. When my mother's voice rang out on the call, I was still lying on the bed, eating fried chicken. The system started screaming loudly, "Get up! Get up! It's past 10 o'clock. Your mother is almost here." I was half asleep listening to the phone, although my eyes were still closed. My voice was already pretending to be extremely alert. "Hello, Mom. I'm eating with my friends. What's up?" Mom's voice was a little doubtful, but she still asked gently, what are you eating?" Looking down, I replied without blinking, "Fried chicken." The system, who was already used to such situations, immediately pretended to be a cute girl, Jojo. If you eat any more, you're done for. Hearing that voice, my mother obviously didn't doubt anything more, just smiled, then eat. Remember, I have something to tell you when I come back. I didn't bother to think about it. It wasn't important anyway. The system immediately muttered, it seems that I still have to rely on you at important moments. Haven't you saved someone once? Haha. Although they said they were colleagues who lived together day and night, was the system trustworthy? Obviously not. It was just trying to flatter me, so that I wouldn't use it as a lever to threaten me anymore. Actually, I had already used that method. Threats are my unbeatable tactic, always making it tremble with fear. Too lazy to reply, I fell back onto the bed and continued playing with my phone. After another life, I still lived to be 30 years old. The trajectory of my life did not change at all. Unlike the main characters who went from unknown to legendary, I was just an ordinary office worker, living a mediocre life. System, you are really useless. You have been reborn 100 times and still haven't changed, and you still want to dream of promotion? The system was mocked by me, and angrily replied, even dogs can't change their habit of eating shit, and you will always be salted fish. However, even though I lived a life without any trouble, one thing had changed. The serial murders did not recur, and this changed Jirue's life. I asked the system many times, the mission was successful, Jirue no longer kills people, so why are you still here? Quickly go away and enjoy your life. The system gritted its teeth and said, do you think I want to stay? The headquarters hasn't given any instructions yet, so I'll have to continue to endure you. The strangest thing was that I never saw Jirue again. It was as if he had never appeared in my life, but my memories of him had never faded. In the afternoon, I slowly sat up, cleaned up roughly, and prepared to go home. My neighborhood wasn't far from here, and it only took about half an hour by bus. As soon as I reached the gate of the residential area, a shiny car turned on its headlights and honked. Huh? Calling me? Half believing, I walked over, and inside the car was a young man with neatly combed hair. Sister Ding. He bowed slightly, politely opening the back door, please get in the car. I stood there, dumbfounded, huh? Do we know each other? He took out his phone and dialed someone. A moment later, my father's voice came from the other end of the line. Daughter, this is my friend. Dad asked him to pick you up. Hurry back, Mom is making dumplings. Hearing Dad's voice, I no longer doubted it, but my heart was still filled with questions. Dad's friend? Since when did he know such people? On the way home, I sat in the car and felt that this man seemed too classy compared to Dad's friends. When I got home, I saw Mom bringing out a tray of steaming hot dumplings. Before I could say anything more, I rushed over and quickly picked up a dumpling and bit into it. It's so hot, it's so hot. Even though I was burned, I still couldn't bear to spit out the dumpling, trying to swallow it but choking. While I was grimacing from choking, a slender, clean hand brought a cup of water to me. I was stunned for a few seconds, then raised my head. The man's eyes, bright as stars, touched me. A series of questions popped into my head. Who is this? Why is he so handsome? Why is such a handsome man here? The strangest thing is, I feel like he looks familiar. System, this isn't. The system suddenly sneered, slap yourself a few times, and you'll see. Daughter, oh my God. My mother frowned, grumbling, you're this old and still like a child. Stop being like this, hurry up and thank him. I turned back to look at the man in a daze. He smiled slightly and replied, it's nothing, uncle and aunt. I stared at him. The more I looked, the more familiar the feeling became, the eyebrows, the eyes, the bridge of the nose, the lips, and that smile. Each piece of memory gradually connected. Jirue? The man in front of him nodded, his eyes shining with gentleness. Long time no see. Ding chow chow. Seeing Jirue again was something I never expected. I couldn't even imagine that he was standing in front of me now, and more importantly, so handsome. Now, we were sitting and eating together, just like the old days. He naturally picked up food, completely unshy, every action seemed strangely familiar. This made me feel very strange. It was as if there had never been any time gap between us, as if we had just separated a few minutes ago. I felt a little confused, but also a little happy, although most of it was tension from having to face such a handsome guy. System, he's so handsome. Having lived 2 lives, this is the first time I've met such a handsome person. The system immediately said sourly, I admit he's handsome, but compared to me, he's still just child's play. I didn't bother paying attention to the system. My mind was filled with romantic thoughts, even thinking about names for my future child. System, tell me, if I mention the past now, wouldn't this be a good opportunity to propose? The system was unusually silent this time. After a while, it choked out a contemptuous sentence, look at yourself. Get a mirror to look at yourself, or else get a puddle of water. Look at how you look, you're no different from a piece of rag. A sentence pulled me back to reality. I sighed in disappointment, forget it, let's eat first. My mother smiled brightly, and said to Ji Rue, you came over unexpectedly today, and even brought gifts, you really surprised us. Surprised was an understatement. Actually, it was more like I was shocked. After dinner, Kaido took the initiative to wash the dishes. Meanwhile, my parents sat on the sofa, massaging his shoulders and exclaiming, this kid is really getting more and more talented as he grows up. And looking at our little girl, Kyo, oh my. Auntie, is there anything else I can help with? My mother quickly waved her hand, her face showing a hint of embarrassment, no, there's nothing. It's late now, you should rest. Ji Rue hesitated, as if there was something difficult to say, Auntie, I want to ask. Is there any empty room in our house? If possible, I want to stay here for a while. Hearing this, my mother was immediately moved, her eyes were red, her voice trembling, of course. You stay here today, let me and your uncle arrange things a bit. After that, my parents were busy cleaning up the empty room in the house, leaving only Ji Rue and I sitting in the living room. Although we used to be schoolmates, things were different now. It had been a long time since we last saw each other, and I felt the atmosphere between us was a bit awkward. Ciao. Ji Rue was the first to break the silence. Huh? I replied, my heart suddenly beating faster. Why am I suddenly so nervous? Do you still remember? His voice was cautious. Of course I remember. I answered firmly, even though I didn't know exactly what he was talking about. Ji Rue smiled, his smile still as warm as ever. From now on, I will always be by your side. After he finished speaking, he slowly approached. I held my breath, my heart almost jumping out of my chest. But he just brushed past me, then reached out to grab a piece of fruit from the plate. Just as I hadn't had time to breathe a sigh of relief, Ji Rue suddenly leaned over, his fingers brushing through my hair in an unintentional manner. Ah, system. He's doing it on purpose. This is definitely a bad boy, daring to seduce me. Help me punish him, the system calmly replied, don't fantasize too much. That's just a story you made up yourself, right? It's not that bad actually. Anyway, being handsome is fine. Before the conversation could continue, my parents had finished cleaning the room. My father shyly said to Ji Rue, this is a newly cleaned room. It was a bit messy before, now you see how it is. Ji Rue just smiled and replied, it's okay. I'm already bothered by my uncle and aunt letting me stay, how could I dare to be picky? It's not a bother. After that, I continued my daily routine, going to work to earn some pocket money. But surprisingly, I met Ji Rue at the bus stop. He was dressed neatly, as if he had been waiting for me for a long time. Let me take you. I didn't refuse, just quietly got into the car. Along the way, the atmosphere fell into silence again. I felt stupid, unable to think of anything to say. After half a day, I finally spoke, how have you been these past few years? To be honest, I've always been worried about him. In my memory, the last time I saw Ji Rui was when he was lying on the ground, covered in blood, looking like an angel about to fall. From that day on, I never saw him again. The system only said that Ji Rui would not repeat the tragedy of his previous life, but did not reveal anything else. It wasn't until yesterday that he appeared in front of me, neat, strong, and more handsome than ever, that I was truly at ease. It didn't matter what had happened, as long as he was living well now. But Ji Rui didn't answer my question right away. He quietly looked forward, his eyes filled with sadness. I'm living well. It's just. Normal days are sometimes hard to get through. No one said anything more, nor asked any more, afraid of stirring up the wounds in his heart. Quickly arriving at the company, I quickly thanked him and ran in to check in. But when I thought about it again, I suddenly realized something. Wait, he doesn't work in the same place as me, why is he here to pick me up? Could it be that he asked for my parents' phone number yesterday? While I was secretly skipping work to surf my phone, I asked the system again. You see, everything is normal now. It seems like there are no more problems, the mission is probably completed? The system only replied with a short sentence, waiting for the headquarters to confirm. The working day passed by in a blur. I yawned as I left the company, wondering whether I should cook chicken stew first or take the bus home first. At this moment, a familiar car honked again. I knocked on the car door, thinking that it was another acquaintance who my parents asked to pick me up, but when the car window rolled down, the person sitting inside was none other than Ji Rui. What's wrong? I asked. Ji Rui smiled and replied lightly, I'll take you home for dinner. Normally, I would stay in the rented apartment so as not to bother my parents. But today, for some reason, I decided to agree. Let's go home. It's been a long time since I ate at home. Ji Rui frowned slightly. You haven't been home for a long time? Hey, it's been a long time since we last saw each other. Do you still care about whether I go home or not? Although he didn't say anything more, he still didn't seem to be pressuring me. In the end, Ji Rui drove me home. When we got there, I suggested, hey, let's eat out? The chicken stew shop across the street here is really good. Ji Rui was still the same as before, quiet but very easy to please. The stewed chicken here is characterized by being very spicy. Even if you choose less spicy, it will still be spicy. Remembering that Ji Rui can't eat spicy food, I specially told the owner, Miss, don't put chili in this dish, it's not spicy at all. He can't eat spicy food, not even a little bit. The owner happily responded. At this moment, Ji Rui was carefully wiping his chopsticks and spoon. When he raised his head, he looked at me intently, then asked, Do you still remember? Remember what? I asked back. I can't eat spicy food. Of course I remember. I smiled, although in my heart I thought, actually I remember everything about him. However, to some extent, this feeling was very special. Although I was a bit embarrassed, because Ji Rui's appearance had changed so much, becoming too handsome, I still tried to stay calm. If this was the old Ji Rui, I would definitely pinch his cheeks and ask, Are you Ji Rui? Ji Rui smiled. Yeah, very good, really very good. Sure enough, Ji Rui still patiently drove me home, not saying anything more, until the car stopped in front of my apartment building. I shook my head, I'm troubling you. From then on, he didn't mind the long distance, regularly picking me up and dropping me off at work every day. I started to feel strange. System, doesn't he have anything to do? The system turned on the mocking mode, don't you know? He's the CEO of a big company, how could he not have anything to do? But he picks me up and drops me off every day, what's going on? The system replied coldly, Go look in the mirror and ask yourself why people pick you up and drop you off just because of some old feelings. One day, after work, I suggested, You don't need to take me home today, I have a party with my colleagues. I've already refused twice before, it would be weird not to go this time. After eating, I'll go home by myself. Ji Rui frowned slightly, then seemed to want to sigh, but in the end just nodded, okay. That day's party was at a fish hot pot restaurant. The atmosphere of the meeting was very lively. The colleagues who usually argued in all kinds of ways now laughed and joked very harmoniously. As for me, I normally didn't have any close friends in the company, and was still just an outsider like before. When I looked at the people around me, I suddenly thought of Ji Rue. His life seemed to have turned a new page, completely different. A change that people could only call the male lead's destiny. Although I didn't know what he had gone through, I knew for sure that it was not an easy path. I asked the system, "I'm near Kaidu, is there anything else I can help with?" The system replied curtly, "No." Then he added another annoying sentence, "Stop meddling. As long as he doesn't turn into a murderous pervert, it's enough. What else do you want?" "Hoo, you mean system. You're bullying me." The system pretended to be pitiful. "Hey, how could I bully my precious? Come on, don't be angry." Humph. Sure enough, the system's nature is shameless. After eating, the whole group of colleagues went to sing karaoke. I didn't want to join, but I couldn't refuse. Soon, the karaoke room was filled with ear-piercing screams as the group leader sang, "Cut the apricot branch." Only then did I regret agreeing to go along. System, why do my ears hurt so much? I think I'm going to die. The system was so annoyed by the singing that he stopped playing the game and held his head, shouting, "Aaa. Can you tell them to shut up?" "No way. I don't dare either." After a while of struggling, the song finally ended. While the group was applauding, I secretly took my bag and prepared to run away. Unexpectedly, the group leader called out to me, "Hey, Xiao Ding, where are you running off to?" The group stopped, making me stiff. "Oh, I'm going out to get some things." "Don't go yet, the big boss will be there later. Stay and say hello before you go." I've been working here for nearly 2 years, but I've never met the general manager. For the sake of food and clothing, I swallowed my tears and nodded, "Yes, I'll wait." The system mocked me again, what a coward. Even more cowardly than an ant. I angrily replied, "Try me, you system that only knows how to talk but can't do anything." After turning back, I sat still like a statue, waiting anxiously. A moment later, the general manager walked into the room. The team leader quickly pointed at me, "This is Xiao Ding, our beautiful girl. If you have anything to say, just tell me." The boss was a short, fat, bald man. When he looked at me, his eyes gave me goosebumps. After a few short greetings, he nodded and smiled. The team leader gestured frantically, whispering into my ear, "Xiao Ding, what are you looking at? Hurry up and invite the boss to drink." Although I was very dissatisfied, I was 24 years old and working for a salary, so I couldn't help but endure. Although I hadn't encountered many things like this in my 2 lives, this time it really made me confused. Trying to keep a forced smile, I raised my glass and walked over. "Hello boss, I'm Ding Qiao Qiao. I'd like to toast you, wishing you good health and prosperity." He stared at me, pretended to laugh twice, and said, "Miss Ding is toasting, of course you have to drink it all." I tried to suppress my annoyance and finished my glass of wine. Thinking that it was over, the team leader intentionally arranged for me to sit right next to him. Around me, my colleagues either showed jealousy, or laughed as if waiting to see a good show, or even looked down on me. No one stood up to defend me. I secretly shed tears and asked the system, why do beautiful girls have to endure such harassment?" The system was silent for a moment and then said, "If this job isn't worth it, then quit. It's just a temporary job with a modest salary, so it's better to stay away from these bad guys." Immediately after, they started forcing me to drink alcohol. My alcohol tolerance was very low, and after only a few drinks, I started to feel dizzy. I tried to keep my last bit of consciousness and used the excuse of going to the bathroom, intending to throw up and quickly leave. When I stood up, the boss even took the opportunity to touch my leg. I almost threw up on the spot. "System, I can't take it anymore. Just kill them all and then end it yourself." The system panicked, Don't do that. What about your mission?" "I don't need any mission. I want to go home." I staggered out and threw up in the bathroom. After vomiting, my mind was still spinning. I decided, no more thinking about this job. Mr. System, take me away. I want to go home. The system sneered, wow, you even call me Mr. System, it sounds so sweet. I shook my head, trying to sober myself up a bit, then walked out to the hallway, looking for the elevator. When the elevator door opened, I almost couldn't believe my eyes. Inside was an unexpectedly familiar face. G. Rue? I doubted that I was seeing things, rubbed my eyes again, and even asked the system, is he really here? Am I seeing things? When Chi Rue saw this scene, he was also stunned, then frowned. Stepped forward, gently hugged my waist, and softly called, Ciao Ciao. As soon as I finished speaking, I reacted immediately. Ah? What is it? Without waiting for me to reply, Chi Rue pulled my hand, his voice low, let's go home. This system, it's so real. He pulled me down the stairs, walking so fast that I couldn't keep up. Ah. System, you're so strong. What? He asked again. I touched my pocket, immediately confused. I didn't bring my bag, it's still in the room. Chi Rue asked, which room? This young man was very tall, with sword-like eyebrows, bright eyes, a straight figure, broad shoulders and a firm waist, completely fitting the ideal model of many girls. His thin, silent figure when he was young intertwined with his current mature, composed appearance, and finally merged into a perfect man. Ciao Ciao was originally very familiar with Chi Rue, and also trusted him very much. Remembering what had just happened, the girl who was as strong as an eagle couldn't help but shed tears. That damn boss, he just molested me and got me drunk. You don't know, I was scared to death. Luckily, you went to get it back for me. Kaido was silent for a long time. He held my hand a little tighter. Okay, I'll go with you. Then, he hugged my waist, his strength was strong but still gentle. Compared to those rude people, his mature figure made me feel strangely safe. When I reached the door of the private room, I didn't dare to go in, I just smiled awkwardly. His gentle eyes almost made me waver, I just wanted to lean on him. Don't be afraid, I'm here. He pushed the door open and entered. The manager in the room immediately stood up and greeted, oh my god, it's Xiao Ding. But before I could finish speaking, Chi Rue wrapped his arms around my waist, his smile made others both shocked and shivering. I am Ciao Ciao's fiancé, Chi Rue. Huh? Fiancé? Everyone thought they were just normal friends, at most they were just boyfriends, but unexpectedly they were fiancés. This really surprised people. Chi Rue. Chi Rue, the manager muttered, as if trying to remember something. After a while he suddenly showed a surprised expression, blurting out, President Chi? The entire room fell into silence. The disdainful gazes just now were all silent. The few people still holding their wine glasses also froze in midair. Ciao Ciao, where's your bag? Here, the fat boss finally came back to his senses, tremblingly handing the bag to Chi Rue, his face showing a flattering smile. I'm so sorry, General Chi, if I knew it was you. Next time I would definitely treat you to a meal to make up for my mistake. Chi Rue did not respond nor show any anger. He took the bag. The atmosphere was so stifling that even his breathing became erratic. But he smiled. I was a little confused, raised my head to look and found that when I looked up at his face, it was truly a breathtakingly beautiful sight, a strong chin, sharp eyebrows, deep eyes filled with stars, and slightly curled lips full of charm. No need to make an appointment. After that, when it was already dark, Chi Rue took off his vest and put it on me, sat me down on the chair, then turned to buy some refreshments. At this time, my favorite drink was cold soda. I was a little surprised. Do you still remember? At this moment, Chi Rue was completely different from his cold demeanor just now. He was so gentle that it melted people, even his smile was gentle and soft like water. Everything related to you, I remember. System, why are you suddenly saying such inappropriate words? Why does it feel a bit ambiguous? Her heart had already started to flutter. The system seemed to understand, automatically replying naturally. Take a rest this time, don't rush back to work. I'll take you somewhere to relax, Chirue said softly. I nodded. Indeed, after what had happened, I also needed to adjust my mood and rest for a few days. But, where should I take you? The answer was quickly revealed. The next morning, when I woke up, Chirue was already waiting in the living room. My mother stood beside me, wiping the table while glaring. What time is it? It's almost 12 noon. Are you a pig? I kept calling you, but you didn't wake up, so in the end I had to pull you up and throw you out of bed. Having lived through 2 lives, I was completely immune to my mother's nagging. I turned to Chirue and asked, have you been waiting long? He smiled, let's go eat first. Chirue took me to the restaurant. It was the dumpling shop that we used to frequent when we were kids. Although the surroundings had changed a lot, the restaurant was still the same as before, no difference at all. Thinking back to my childhood, every time my mother didn't cook, I would lie that I wanted to go out and play with Kaido. Even though my stomach was growling with hunger, Kaido would still help me lie. When my mother wasn't paying attention, my father would secretly stuff money into my hand, and the 2 children would run straight to this dumpling shop. This one has shrimp filling, it's delicious. Suddenly, he put a dumpling in my bowl, pulling me back to reality. I looked up at the man who was quietly eating, remembering the boy who always saved the best things for me. It was still Kaido. A sentence suddenly popped out from my mind, shortening all the distance. I used my chopsticks to pick up more forcefully, then instructed, the pork is also delicious, eat a lot. Kaido paused. He slowly raised his head, his eyes gentle, smiling slightly after a moment of silence. Okay, you eat it all. After finishing eating, Kaido immediately took me away. Where are we going? He turned his head and smiled lightly, secret. Oh, what else is he planning to do that is so mysterious? Then we arrived at a large villa. Where are you taking me? I was suddenly a little surprised. Chirue didn't say anything, just smiled, and led me into the garage. Inside was a beautiful Maserati. I was both surprised and confused. Wow, but, why is it so exaggerated? It doesn't suit my style at all. He still didn't answer, just smiled. Then, he led me to tour the house. The first floor looked quite good, but the decoration was a bit feminine. My heart tightened slightly. System, he's not a pervert, right? He's not a pervert, is he? The system also started to think, probably not, he still looks normal. When they went to the second floor, I saw some women's handbags and makeup. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I patted Kaido's shoulder and said softly, it's okay, no matter what happens to you, you will always be my best friend. Indeed, after what had happened, I also needed to adjust my mood and rest for a few days. But, where should I take you? The answer was quickly revealed. The next morning, when I woke up, Chirue was already waiting in the living room. My mother stood beside me, wiping the table while glaring. What time is it? It's almost 12 noon. Are you a pig? I kept calling you, but you didn't wake up, so in the end I had to pull you up and throw you out of bed. Having lived through 2 lives, I was completely immune to my mother's nagging. I turned to Chirue and asked, have you been waiting long? He smiled, let's go eat first. Chirue took me to the restaurant. It was the dumpling shop that we used to frequent when we were kids. Although the surroundings had changed a lot, the restaurant was still the same as before, no difference at all. Thinking back to my childhood, every time my mother didn't cook, I would lie that I wanted to go out and play with Kaido. Even though my stomach was growling with hunger, Kaido would still help me lie. When my mother wasn't paying attention, my father would secretly stuff money into my hand, and the 2 children would run straight to this dumpling shop. This one has shrimp filling, it's delicious. Suddenly, he put a dumpling in my bowl, pulling me back to reality. I looked up at the man who was quietly eating, remembering the boy who always saved the best things for me. It was still Kaido. A sentence suddenly popped out from my mind, shortening all the distance. I used my chopsticks to pick up more forcefully, then instructed, the pork is also delicious, eat a lot. Kaido paused. He slowly raised his head, his eyes gentle, smiling slightly after a moment of silence. Okay, you eat it all. After we finished eating, Kaido immediately took me away. Where are we going? He turned his head and smiled lightly. Secret. Oh, what else is he planning to do that is so mysterious? Then we went to a large villa. Where are you taking me? I was suddenly a little surprised. Chirue didn't say anything, just smiled, and led me into the garage. Inside was a beautiful Maserati. I was both surprised and confused. Wow, but why is it so exaggerated? It doesn't suit my style at all. He still didn't answer, just smiled. Then, he took me on a tour of the house. The first floor looked quite good, but the decoration was a bit feminine. My heart tightened slightly. System, he's not a pervert, right? He's not a pervert, is he? The system also started to think, probably not, he still looks normal. When they went up to the second floor, I saw some women's handbags and makeup. Finally, I couldn't bear it anymore. I patted Chirue's shoulder and said softly, "It's okay, no matter what happens to me, I will always be your best friend." Chirue patted her head. "What are you talking about? These things are all yours." I was suddenly stunned. Huh? Chirue sighed. "Have you forgotten everything?" His deep voice was like a flowing stream, evoking the faded memories in my heart. "Do you remember what you said when you were little?" "I don't remember." "I remember very clearly. You said that in the future, if anyone makes you angry, they must buy you delicious food, buy you a nice handbag, expensive cosmetics, buy you a villa and a Maserati. Also, that person must not be hot-tempered, even if you cause trouble, they must not be angry. Whatever you say, you have to do it." I looked at him in surprise and confusion. "Are you serious?" "Yes, I have always been serious. So, all of this, I have prepared so that I can stand by your side forever. Don't be hasty, even if you cause trouble, don't get angry, whatever you say, I have to do it." Ding Chao Chao, do you agree? Chapter 4. Ever since Chirue confessed, my life has been in chaos for a long time. On one hand, I felt a little embarrassed, on the other hand, I felt confused. The system then raised its voice to mock. "What? What are you still pretending for? Don't you dare agree?" Ever since Chirue gave me the villa, the system seemed to be crazy with jealousy, always saying sarcastic words. I didn't even pay attention anymore. Strangely, I didn't seem to need to do my job, because the company I had just quit went bankrupt. It was definitely Chirue's doing. As for Chirue, he rarely mentioned it again, just quietly waiting for me to answer. Right now, he was sitting in my living room. Mom had served dinner a long time ago, but all her attention was on Chirue, completely ignoring my eating. The clock on the wall struck exactly 6 o'clock. Chirue immediately stood up and knocked on my door. I seriously suspected that he had come on time. I didn't dare look straight at him, just lowered my head to eat. But even though I tried to ignore it, I could still feel his burning gaze. The system said bitterly, "Look, so handsome, and also rich, why is he sticking to you?" A sentence from the system made me wake up. That's right, handsome, kind, even gave me a villa, and was a childhood friend. Isn't this buff too perfect? I tried to act calm, wiped my mouth, as if I had already made up my mind. System, we're not afraid of meeting a perverted murderer anyway. Let's just do it this way. I'll sacrifice my life to help you complete the mission, okay? System, ? I stood up with an extremely arrogant look. My parents looked at me without understanding anything. I pointed at Chirue, calmly declaring, "I will be with him." Silence. The silence was terrifying. Chirue sat opposite, slightly stunned, but then quickly regained his composure, smiling gently. My father was the first to react. "Daughter, did you have a high fever that made your head hurt?" Chirue gently said, "Uncle, aunt, this is the truth. I've liked Xiao Xiao for a long time, it was very difficult to convince her to agree to be with me. I hope you two can accept, I will take good care of her." 0546. My mother looked worried, thinking that her daughter had been tricked. She was about to say something, But when she saw Xiao Qiao holding Qi Rui's hand, she sighed, okay, okay. But you must treat her well, don't let her life be ruined. What? Who ruined who? Shouldn't this be directed at me? Hearing this, Qi Rui smiled confidently, it's okay, auntie. I will be really good to her, I guarantee it. Why does it look like a rich young master marrying a mentally unstable girl? No, I really have a problem. Because of Qi Rui's steadfast attitude, my parents finally agreed. Not long after accepting the proposal, I moved into his villa. From then on, I lived like a lazy pig. The system was so jealous that it swore to never talk to me again. One morning, when Qi Rui went to work, the system suddenly spoke after a long period of silence. Master, the mission is complete, I am about to leave. Huh? The system was a little sad. You really don't regret it at all? Not yet, I haven't played enough. Moreover, I still have some of your secrets, shouldn't I leave something for the future? System, 3 dots. Then, it sighed, goodbye, I wish you happiness until old age. Me, 3 dots. Suddenly there was no one around to complain, it was indeed a little strange. Qi Rui returned, the two of them watched the latest movie together. The male lead was very handsome, his acting was good, especially the scene where he saved the female lead was extremely heroic. Qi Rui frowned, commenting, it's just SOSO. She blinked, refuting, this is SOSO? Then what is SOSO? He calmly replied, a prince. Huh? In the dark night, save the weak but brave princess. A prince 1,000 times stronger than this character. She looked at him blankly, then he smiled, bowed his head and leaned on her shoulder proudly, but thinking back, you are the strongest. In the quiet dark night, like a heroic prince, you saved the suffering princess. The story ended like a fairy tale ending. From then on, they lived happily together forever.